I grew up in a very rural, mountainous area in western Massachusetts, known as the Berkshires. It's part of the northern stretch of the Appalachian Mountains, and the Appalachian Trail ran right through my neighborhood. When I was about 5 or 6, back in the early 90s, I had a friend named Jared. Since it was the days before cell phones and video games were still in 2D, we would often go exploring in the vast forests behind our houses. It was like a giant, unsupervised playground where we could occasionally find something interesting, or even downright creepy things. One day, instead of taking the usual hiking trails, we decided to take an old ATV trail that began at the end of the small cul-de-sac. It was a steep, narrow, and rocky dirt road that was used to telegraph lines at the turn of the century. There were deep dirt bike tracks and large jagged rocks along it, making it nearly impossible to drive with a normal car or truck. We figured it might be a cool shortcut and went on our way. I decided to bring a little disposable camera because we had heard that there were creepy abandoned houses somewhere in the woods. And, well, I was already a budding horror nerd and urban explorer at the time, so documenting it to scare other friends later on was a necessity. It was a beautiful sunny day and dead quiet as I recall. Suddenly, when we were about a quarter up the way, we began to hear the humming of an engine. It was coming back down the hill. As it grew louder, I noticed a big rusty pickup truck bobbing clumsily up the trail towards us. We froze, not knowing what to do. It was a shitty-looking old truck, and there appeared to be some sort of tarp over the bed. When it was close enough, I could see the driver's face, and he was staring directly at me. He was pudgy, middle-aged, and wore really big, outdated glasses. He stopped the truck to the right of us and rolled down his window. I could see that his hair was unkempt, and there were beads of sweat all over his face. He smelled terrible. The man began asking us who we were and what we were doing. He had an accusing tone to his voice. Assuming he was some sort of park ranger or off-duty sheriff, we answered his questions obediently. When he asked what we were doing, I told him that we were just there taking pictures, and then held up my little camera. For some reason, this made the man's demeanor change from authoritative to over-friendly. He began saying what a good idea that was, and how nice the scenery was here. He then remarked something about how he'd like to join us. Jared and I had stopped responding at this point, and started exchanging concerned glances. The man just trailed off, looking down. Then he said goodbye and continued driving up the rocky trail. Jared and I just stood there and watched him. We figured we'd wait a few minutes until we were certain he had driven away, and then continue on our way up. We were genuinely confused, but tried to dismiss it as just some crazy hillbilly passing through. Another 1,000 feet or so up the trail, I saw the front end of the pickup truck sticking out from the clearing just ahead. It was him. The engine was off, and as we got closer, we met the man's eyes again. He was just sitting in the truck, staring at us in a way that I can only describe as predatory. We had both grabbed a couple of decent-sized hiking sticks at this point, and were nervously clutching them as if they were swords. The man just stared at us. When we passed the truck, the man suddenly stuck his head out the window and shouted, "Hey, do you know what day it is?" Not what time, or what date it is, or any other question that would have at least seemed somewhat normal. He wanted to know what day it was. "Saturday," I replied. "Oh, okay," he said in a timid voice, and then sat back in his truck, still staring at us with that blank expression. We hurried up the hill and quickly abandoned our plans. We didn't know exactly what happened, but we knew we did not want to run into that weirdo again, and decided to take the much more wooded Appalachian Trail back. Thinking back on things like this, it's almost funny how parents take steps to protect their children, but also not want to emotionally scar them at the same time. They would tell us to never talk to strangers, but never say exactly why. I suppose a brief biography on someone like John Wayne Gacy or the Green River Killer would have hit that point home, but no one needs their kids having nightmares about killer clowns. The reason I'm saying all this is because many years later, when I was at home from college, I was at a party with a kid named Tyler who grew up in the projects not too far from my neighborhood. Tyler and I always used to like exchanging stories and trying to drunkenly outtell one another. On this particular night, the subject was, of course, scary stories, and he went on to hear about a local lore of murders and haunted houses. Eventually, after a significant amount of beer and scotch, I told the story I just shared, thinking it was a creepy but down-to-earth anecdote to counter his increasingly hard-to-believe ghost encounters. As I was telling the story, I could see Tyler growing uncomfortable. He began asking me questions about the man and the truck, like what color it was and what kind of things he said to us. It was so long ago I couldn't quite recall every little detail, but I could see that this was all familiar to him. Tyler's face had a look of genuine fear, so I finally asked what was wrong. His name was Louis Lint, a serial killer that was arrested in 1994 in connection with the rape and murder of 2 children in the same county. The police believe he is responsible for even more disappearance than just the 2 that were found. He would dispose of their bodies in the woods using the same old truck. Tyler said the same man would drive around his neighborhood, creeping around the playgrounds and anywhere children were playing, but he also worked at a nearby movie theater. Around that time, a boy he knew went missing, and Tyler is certain it was him. I was speechless, and don't really know what to say to this day. I can't say for sure that the man I saw was really Louis Lint, but my friends believe it was, and I shudder to think of how I'm going to prepare my future kids for a world where there are monsters like that roaming around. Hunting. It's an avid hobby of mine and runs in the family. My favorite animals to catch are deer and boars, and those are quite a challenge to catch, and I love a challenge. As well as general hunting, camping in the woods is therapeutic for me, as you're in nature's natural habitat, which can be greatly enjoyed when you're by yourself. Accompanying this area are the type of people you meet whilst hiking. I've met people who shared their food and campfire with me, and some even hiked with me in the gorgeous wilderness we call the woods. But most of the time it's your animal friends who accompany you whilst walking and camping. I wish this story was all of the above, but things took a plummet for the worst. And this is my story. I had recently completed an assignment which I would like to describe as long-winded and quite boring, even though it was my favorite topic, human biology. Due to this, I decided to take a 5-day hike across a vast stretch of woods, brilliant for hunting apparently. As a hunting enthusiast, I decided to hunt for some deer and possibly some boars if I came across any. So, I prepped up my water filter, packed my tranquilizer and hunting equipment, as well as my pop-up tent and some snacks high in energy, and took a 3.5-hour drive to my destination. I was stoked and excited, as I loved camping and hunting, as I could unwind around nature and overall enjoy the set atmosphere the woods provided. After what seemed like days behind the wheel, I arrived at what looked like an abandoned parking lot at 3:30 p.m. All the bays were empty, and the ranger's office looked as if it hadn't been occupied for years. But I brushed it off, parked, and began my hike. The place gave me a very uneasy vibe, as if the woods beyond the ranger's office were sinister, in a way. I can't really describe what gave me this uneasiness, but I honestly chalked it up to the place looking abandoned and creepy. Either way, I headed out onto the path and began scouting the area for animals. I've got to be honest, this set of woods was exquisite. The sun was shining through the trees, and the animals were up and active, and I came across a few deer, but no boars unfortunately. Fast forward to 8:30 p.m. It was uneventful to be honest, and it was getting pretty dark and gloomy now as it's mid-November. Now, I need to add that I'm also quite a paranoid guy, as I was burgled at the age of 15, and all was okay in the end. But that paranoia of something or someone lurking in the shadows stays with me in the back of my mind when I'm alone at night. So then I whipped up a fire, cooked up some marshmallows, and warmed up some beans, and ate away, minding my own business. After this, I decided to go for a late night hunt, as I did a 2-week course on how to hunt prey in the woods when it's dark, and I think it really paid off. 15 minutes later, I put the fire out as I was preparing to go on a late night hunt. But then my blood ran as cold as ice, and my hands started to shake when I saw the silhouette of a person about 100 meters away from me. It was unexpected, so I internally freaked the fuck out. As well as this, I noticed what seemed to be a pocket knife in their left hand, and it looked like they were crouching and stalking something, as they had their knife at the ready. I believe it was a man, about 6 feet tall, and his back was facing me, so I believed that he didn't notice I was there, which I took as a godsend. However, it could have just been another hunter, like myself. After shitting bricks whilst watching this man for 5 minutes, he disappeared into the inky night, and I got over it pretty quickly, as I thought he was a fellow hunter like myself. I honestly wish that was the case. Fast forward 1 hour, and it's around 9:45 p.m., and I'm feeling confident enough to go back into the black wilderness and catch a deer or two, or maybe even a boar. I pinpointed where my tent was on the map, and went on my way with my hunting equipment. 10 minutes later, I'm practically in no man's land, and everywhere around me was pitch black. But I knew what I was doing. I was stalking a deer, which hadn't noticed me, and was about 50 meters in front of me, plodding around the eerie woods. I grabbed my tranquilizer and placed the deer in my sights. That was when I heard twigs snap. My eyes darted, my legs went into jelly mode, and I jerked my neck to the source of the noise. What the fuck? A silhouette appeared out of the tree line to the left of me, about 50 yards away, and just watched me. Not the deer, but me. The deer was long gone now, so it was just me and this unwanted guest. His size concluded to me that he was the same guy as before, 6 feet, roughly 200 pounds. He stared at me, and I stared back, my body still as a stone, but my sudden outburst of adrenaline was making me shake. I couldn't see his face, as it was too dark. Fuck, was he a late-night human butcherer? Am I not going to see daylight again? I just about choked out. Who's there? I tried to say in the calmest voice I could, but fear was evident when I asked the question. The man raised the hand with his pocket knife and pointed his index finger towards me. That was it. I fucking bolted up north, whilst mildly tripping up and hitting my head off the branches. Twigs snapped rapidly behind me as this son of a bitch was chasing me. I looked back once and saw his vacant right hand brushing tree branches to the side of him, his knife gripped tightly in his left hand. I then realized that during all of this, I dropped my tranquilizer. Fuck that shit, I can buy another one. I know, I should have shot the guy, but it's amazing what one can forget when in a horrifying situation. Even if it is a gun, I wasn't going back for it. A ton of thoughts were going through my mind whilst I was fleeing. Why me? What does he want? Money? My food? What could it fucking be? That's when I honestly thought I pissed myself, as he said this in a rapid tone. Isn't this fun? He then had the goddamn audacity to start laughing in a patronizing way, and I couldn't take it anymore. I sped up, and I'll tell you now, it's amazing what the human body can do when adrenaline and natural instinct takes over. I never ran so fast in my life. I made a hard right, dove into some bushes nearby quietly, and eventually lost the guy. I heard his footsteps go the opposite way, and it turns out I went in a huge circle, as I could see my tent, only 50 meters away from me now. I was fucking shaking, and tears were starting to form, but I had to stay strong. I just had to. What would my father do in this situation? I tuned my ears into the inky darkness, and heard nothing, and I saw nothing. I was not going to turn on my phone torch, as I'd be an open target. I checked my watch, and it was 10:30 p.m. I've been in the tent for 10 minutes now. I sat still in my tent, listening to every small noise I could hear in the woods. Did I just hear a snap? I held in a gasp as I heard a twig snap behind my tent, and with that accompanied a low and sinister voice. You think you can run? I win. With that, my tent was being sliced open, and the fucker popped his head in. He was licking his lips and had his wide eyes locked on my eyes. "You lose," he screams as he pulls out a knife. Fighting. Not my strongest point, but the gym made me a pretty strong guy. So as he tried to stab me, I grabbed both his arms and fended him off from plunging a blade into my torso. I tried to disarm the fucker, and he laughed during the process. I thought he was trying to intimidate me. However, I was ready to kill. Not a deer, not a boar, but a human. I restrained his left wrist, but his knife was inches away from going into my foot, so I stepped onto his right hand, pulled back on his left wrist. Then, his left wrist snapped, and he let out a blood-curdling scream. I had the upper hand, and took advantage of this. I got the knife from his distorted, shattered hand, and gave him a taste of his own fucking medicine. I sunk the knife right into his hand, and he screamed. I'd lay a few punches, and I think I popped him in the nose, but I had no regrets. I grabbed my arm in pain, as he made me bend in an awkward position when he was on top of me, when he first ripped the tent open, but I honestly couldn't care about my injuries. He tried to kick me, but I punched him in the face until he was unconscious. I checked my phone, and I had no phone service. "Fuck," I panted. I picked up this guy into a fireman's lift, and I remember my way to the ranger's office, as it was exactly west of my tent. After an hour of struggling with a killer on my shoulders out cold, I found the ranger station, and to my surprise, a young man, around 20 years old, was there. I collapsed to my knees as I explained the situation. As it turns out, the guy slashed my left bicep, but the adrenaline numbed out the pain. So the ranger called for backup, and they eventually arrived. I don't know how long it took. I decided, fuck my belongings. I was not going back out there to retrieve them. The ranger offered to drive me to the nearest hospital in my car, and I took him up on that. The Night Stalker was taken away, but was semi-conscious. The next day, I woke up in the hospital bed to an officer, and what he said next is burned into my memory, never to be erased. When I first saw the killer, his back was towards me, knife in his left hand, and he was crouching, as I mentioned earlier. It turns out that he was stalking another hiker, who he brutally murdered and mutilated at the scene. They found chloroform at the scene, hence me not hearing any screams or cries for help. I vowed from there onwards to never go hunting again by myself. The next time I went hunting was half a year after this incident, with 4 other mates. And although the woods had a beautiful atmosphere and vibe, I never judged a book by its cover, as the tables can be turned within the blink of an eye. For all of you going camping or hunting, stay safe, and remember, don't think that these things can't happen to you. So this happened back when I was in 5th grade, in 2005, when I was living in western Montana. My bedroom was shared with my 2nd grade sister, and we had a king-size bed that we shared. To describe my little house, our room was facing the backyard, but was a basement room. Basically, standing up looking out the window in my room, I was eye level with the ground outside. Up to the left above my window, I could see onto our deck which looked into the upstairs kitchen. Kind of confusing, but bear with me. Anyway, this particular night my sister and I were having a sleepover, and our friend was in the bed with us. When we were falling asleep around 1 a.m., our friend woke us up to show us that a deer was on our deck. I looked out, and we all saw a deer on our deck. This was normal in Montana, so we laid back down. I guess my friend stayed up staring at it, and she woke us up about 5 minutes later saying that she thought it was actually a person. Right then, we look and we see the shadow move a little, and it was clearly a tall person's silhouette. We started freaking out, and then we saw 2 green laser lights. They were just like 2 small pinpoint lights that were coming from the guy's head area. We all thought it was binoculars. At this point, we were on high alert, and our eyes adjusted a little, and we saw clearly a guy looking into our kitchen window. I was too scared to go tell my parents all the way upstairs, and past the view of this guy looking in the window. So we used my friend's cell phone and called my home phone. None of my family owned cell phones at the time. It rang loudly, and we watched the guy run full speed off the deck. As soon as he ran away, the three of us ran screaming upstairs and told my dad. He called the cops, and they searched the streets, but never found the guy. Now here's where things get weird. So just 2 weeks earlier, the town's police station sent out notices to the neighborhood telling us that a person of interest and dangerous sexual predator who had a warrant for his arrest had been spotted in our area. You can find a link to the Wikipedia in the description. A tip had said he was staying with a family member 3 streets down from us. I remember this because I remember my mom, who was a bit paranoid, drove us by the address of the house once the notice came out and made us very aware that this was going on and would not let us ride our bikes outside during this time. I remember looking at that house every time we drove by. Turns out, maybe 2 or 3 months later, this same man was apprehended for the kidnappings and abuse and murders of 2 children and killing their family in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, only about 2 hours away from my house. In some of his interrogations, he confessed to stalking kids by watching their homes at night. And with what? Night vision goggles. The same green lights we saw that night. I also one time found some obscure website that had some of his writings where he discussed living in Montana at various times, and discussed that right before killing this family, he had searched for children to kidnap. We were the same age as the kids he kidnapped. A little disclaimer. I have no proof that he was the person looking in our window, but all the evidence adds up for me, down to the timeline and the area we lived in at the time. I won't go into detail about his crimes. They are all over the news, and you can read about them if you follow the links in the description. I've researched this guy in depth, and he is one sick mofo. He has allegedly encrypted diaries of all his crimes and filmed the tortures he committed. So, I consider myself blessed. Hopefully he stays locked up. Until now, I haven't actually had any scary stories to tell. This happened a few days ago. My name is Lilly, and I'm a 5'3" female, and I'm 18 years old. This story takes place in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I would like to note that my mom has lived in this area for several years, but it was only 3 months ago that I moved here from Ohio to live with her. I live in a very shady neighborhood, but in a really nice, decent-sized house. The other night, I got the idea to head out to the park 2 blocks away from my house and enjoy some time alone, swinging and listening to music. This was at 7:30 p.m., but now that fall has rolled around, it gets dark outside at around 7 o'clock. I don't know what I was thinking going to the park at night, alone. The area was completely dead, and a car would only drive by every 5 minutes. I suppose it was a mixture of living so close by, and just being a typical teenager that made me feel like I was invincible and had nothing to worry about. I sat down, put on my headphones, and began swinging. It might be a childish thing for someone as old as me to do, but I really dislike sports and physical activity, and swinging is one of the very few physical activities I do enjoy, and always have. Across from the swing there is a road. Again, not a busy one. And beyond that there are some streets, and another park near Prospect Lake. I wouldn't say it had been 5 minutes yet, before I had seen a speck near the lake illuminated by streetlights. This person was far away, but getting incredibly close to me very fast. I've never been in danger in public, at least, not that I can remember. My innocent mind and optimistic view of the world thought that maybe this person was running towards me because they lost their pet, or someone else was in trouble. I don't know. I know it was naive of me to think that way. As the person charged up to me, I skidded quickly to halt my swing and stood up. The person was a male, Caucasian, had dark hair from what I could tell in the darkness, and was wearing all black. He wasted no time in slipping off his book bag and pulling out a gun. My heart lurched, and he said nothing to me, but as he loaded it, I began running towards the road to my left. I don't know anything about guns, but this one appeared to have a wider gray barrel and was roughly 4 inches in length. I heard him running after me, and not knowing the type of gun this guy had, or his intentions, I was terrified, and I remember thinking I was more than likely going to get killed. I didn't really have time to think, but in a split second, I considered what happens after you die, which no one can be for absolute certain. I thought about how devastated my mom, my other family, and my boyfriend would be once they found out I was dead. As I ran, I attempted to zigzag, but it was a really weak attempt, as the area was fairly open except for a few trees. A red truck drove by on the road, and I approached it. But as I approached the road, I heard a shot go off and felt instant pain in my left foot. I think the kid probably did this so I would fall, because if all he wanted was to cause me pain, he could have hit an easier target like my back or legs. I was limping now, but quickly, the adrenaline coursing through my body. I screeched in terror, crying, begging, and screaming for someone to help me. I refused to look behind me to see if I was still being chased. Luckily, the red truck stopped, and a family, which appeared to be a father and his 2 sons, stepped out. I breathlessly explained the situation, sobbing and shaking. They let me get into the back seat, but weren't happy about it. We saw a glimpse of the man who shot me running across a busy street farther to the right, in the opposite direction of the truck, and past a 7-Eleven before he was out of sight. With the lights in the truck on, I was able to see that I wasn't bleeding. I was able to put together that I hadn't been shot with a real gun when I was able to continue running, but I was still incredibly shaken up. My father scolded me for not calling 911 immediately, but if I had even paused or slowed down to even call them from my phone, I could have been put in serious danger. That man shot me in the foot because he wanted me to fall. Why else would he have done it? If I had fallen, as I said, no one was around and the area was dead. I could have been shot more, attacked, raped, or even killed had he gotten a hold of me. The family dropped me off at my house, and I went inside. My mom's boyfriend, who was known for his bad temper and protective nature, stormed out of the house into the park to find the guy, without even asking me what direction he had gone in. I stayed with my mom, and we called the police to file a report because I was worried about other people getting hurt by this sick fuck. Turns out, someone had already called the cops when they heard my screams for help, and an officer was already posted there. The police came and took my statement. As I said, I just moved here not long ago, and don't know anyone, let alone someone who would want to hurt me. So this was a stranger who was simply just wanting to be cruel. The top of my foot is very swollen, and my entire foot aches. When I step on it, my level of pain shoots from a 4 to a 10. But again, I'm not bleeding. It was more likely a BB gun or a pellet gun, but to be safe, paramedics checked me out and didn't seem to be alarmed, but told me if the pain continued, I should go to the hospital. There are so many tiny bones in people's hands and feet that it would be hard to tell if one was broken without an X-ray. As I write this, I am still very shaken up and anxious. Well, I have an anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed last year, so I was already anxious in the first place. I can't sleep, and although the situation could have been much more severe, and I'm grateful that it wasn't, that was the only time I had ever felt I was in that much danger. I wish I had gone with my gut feeling and ran immediately, as soon as I noticed him. Actually, I wish I wouldn't have been stupid enough to go there by myself at night in the first place. To the people listening to this, especially women, in their teens, but men can also be targets for things like this as well, and also people of different ages. Don't go out at night by yourself, even if you're not going far from home. Always take your phone and someone with you. Though most people have more brains than me and wouldn't have gotten themselves into this situation, I hope this advice helps keep someone safe. because it could happen to anyone. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. I hope you all had a great weekend, and if you're looking for more scary stories, make sure you're subscribed to my second channel, Fear Your Maker. I just released some new Ouija board stories over there yesterday, so make sure you go check it out. I'll have a link in the description. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. I pinpointed where my tent was with the map. Go, dude. Go away. You gonna go lay down? Go lay down. Go. Do something, dude. Go. Dude, you're just gonna sit in your mouth. Get the fuck out.
Now,